Good evening. Happy Thursday. Happy it's maybe spring again, almost a little bit. Um, they really made long trailers in the 70s. Isn't that wild? I have a kid who's 13, and then when we try to watch movies that are old and I show her trailers, as soon as they start, I'm like, she's never going to watch this movie because the trailers are so weird and strange. Um, Anyways, welcome to the Walker Cinema. My name is Pablo De Ocampo. I'm the director and curator of Moving Image here, and I'll just begin tonight by grounding us in an acknowledgement that where we are today is the traditional, ancestral, and the contemporary homelands of the Dakota. This land was inhabited by the Dakota, as well as many other indigenous nations who've lived on and around and near this area for many centuries and millennia. As an uninvited guest here in this land, this is something that I say when I'm in public events as kind of a public reminder to myself about where I am and what I do and how I do the work that I do within a cultural institution. It is so great to see so many people out tonight for our Hmong Filmmaker Showcase. Some of you may have been here last week. We were showing a film called Bitterroot by the Chicago filmmaker Vera Brunner-Sung about a Hmong family and community in Montana. Though that was made in Montana and made by a filmmaker who is not herself Hmong, many people here in the Twin Cities were a part of that production. And I think many of them might be in the room today. And so when we started, big shout out. When I first began that conversation with Vera and some producers of the film, Melissa Vang and Yang, who are also here in the audience tonight, about showing that film here at the Walker, one of the things that came up was like, well, what else could we do to kind of honor the Hmong community here in the Twin Cities? And they were like, can we do two screenings, one of Bitterroot and another where we showcase some of the large, big, burgeoning, diverse talent of Hmong filmmakers here in the Twin Cities, to which we were enthusiastically happy to support that. And so this is kind of part two of a two-part program that started last week, looking at Hmong stories on film and sitting in recognition of the 50th anniversary of the first Hmong immigrants coming to the United States. This night's program is organized by Melissa and by Yang, who were the curators of the program that we're looking at tonight. There were also producers and worked on Bitterroot that we watched here last week. And just to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to do tonight, because it's, there's going to be some ups and downs. It's not stop and start. We're not just going to watch a movie for a couple of hours. We're going to start with two youth films, so that will begin the program. That's a shorter little segment. We're going to watch two different films. That'll be, 6 or 7, 8 minutes of films that we're going to look at, followed by a discussion led with filmmakers and with Melissa and with Yang. They'll join us up here on stage. That's part one of the night. That's the short first part of the evening, the preamble, if you will. Then we'll continue on to 4 other films by local artists here in the Twin Cities. Some people who are joining us from elsewhere but have connections here. And those films will play the second half of the evening. That's about an hour, 57 minutes, I think, exactly, of material that we'll look at that. And at that point, I'm back on stage to lead the Q&A and discussion with those filmmakers. So it's a big variety of different things that we're going to look at tonight. Lots of different stories, lots of different perspectives. This is a really fun and special program to be hosting here at the Walker. I'm thrilled to see so many folks out here to support it. And I'm going to stop talking because we're going to watch some films. So thanks so much for coming. We'll do introductions to the filmmakers when people are on stage so we can associate some faces with some names. See you soon.
Oh, yeah. It is our pleasure to have Duo and Gao Yer be up here with us. We can quickly explain how we chose these individuals, but so when we were doing this filmmaker showcase, we knew that we wanted to showcase the youth. So I was like, Melissa knew who she wanted to choose, and I was like, I want to open up to one of my students. I teach a film production class at Hope Community Academy, and I was like, I want to open up to one of my students so that they can see the value of storytelling and what filmmaking can get you. And so I narrowed it down to a handful of students, and in the end we chose Gao Yer's film, and that's how Gao Yer is. That's why her film showcase tonight.
Yeah. Can we please give another big, warm welcome applause to the two filmmakers? Yay! Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Kazua, Melissa Vang. I know we didn't introduce ourselves. You can say.
And I'm Yang.
And then we can go down. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Gao Yer. Hi, my name is Dua.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was a few youth who I knew I wanted to showcase, but I remember the first film Dua made, which was like way back then, and it was like short animation drawn, and I was like, oh, maybe I should ask Dua if she would like to showcase that, but I didn't realize she made a more recent one in 2020, and so when I asked, it was more of like, Dora, are you ready to share your stories? And it was just an invitation for her to showcase the work she does. But yeah, so that's kind of where the curation came in. We can start with questions. So what we're gonna do is actually to not give the youth a more nervous breakdown, Ying and I, we're gonna moderate the questions, and we're gonna keep it to a discussion where Ying and I we have with Duan Gao, and I encourage you, after the screening of the second part, please like come up and graciously, nicely, quietly introduce yourself, and if you have any questions for them, feel free to. But we're just gonna have a talk here so you guys can feel more comfortable.
Yeah, our first question for you two is, what inspired you to create this short film? And any one of you guys can go first.
What really inspired me to make this film is that I was like really bored. Everyone can tell that, yeah. And I really wanted a way to express my emotions. So I made a video about being bored. Yeah, that's basically it, yeah.
Well, I chose Tina Matt for this film, not because she was my close friend, but this film was actually an assignment. And so then we were learning about documentaries, and I chose Tina Matt because I wanted to showcase how it is to be a Hmong daughter. And in the video, Tina Matt is the only Hmong daughter in her family, so I chose her, and that's what the film's about.
Cool, thank you. The next question is, what was the biggest challenge in making your film?
The biggest challenge for me is that I made my video during the coronavirus, so it was really hard to edit and stuff, because I was just 8 years old, and I don't know how to edit videos. And I really needed my mom's help, but they're busy, obviously. So I guess finding the people who could help me during that time was the hardest part. Yeah.
Like I said, it was an assignment. So the hardest thing was meeting all the requirements and getting it done on time.
So here's another question for you two. What do you want people to take away from your film?
I guess that what I want people to take away is that some people can be really bored and lonely, and it's like good to help them, and yeah, basically that.
Sorry, I kind of don't know how to answer that. I think to just show that if you work really hard for it, you could achieve something.
All right. Oh, you can close it. You can ask the last one.
Yeah, we have one more question, and this one is, what's next for you guys? I know that the school year is ending. What are your summer plans? What are you guys planning to continue to make films? What are your goals?
My summer plans are mainly what I'm doing now. I'm an intern at a place called In Progress, and there I edit podcast, and I want to do like more podcasting so I can improve my stories and videos. Yeah.
This summer, I have a summer internship with Right Track. I'll be working at Wood Garden. It's a assisted living care, so I'll be helping around there. And with filming, it's not really my thing, but if I got an opportunity to do it again, I would do it again.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Gal. Thank you, Duel. Thank you.
All right, filmmakers, come on up to the stage. All right, in order of screening order, we have Neng Tao, Gregory Yang, Julie Grand, and Peter Yang. Yeah, big round of applause. Thanks, everybody. Melissa and Yang were up here with the youth doing the sort of very softball questions, but you get me to be like the bad cop with the hardball questions. Just kidding. I think is a good way to start, just because we watched a lot of really different material, a lot of very different stories. Let's just go down the row in order, and I'd love it if you could just maybe give a little bit of like context, like where did this film come from, how did it start, how did it get made, and get a little bit of the backstory for the stories you're telling.
Thank you everyone for being here. My film Niu Xin Dao, which means bullfighting in English, it started while I was on a Fulbright grant in Laos, actually. So during the new year of 2023, basically everyone kind of takes a break. So I took the time to go from Luang Prabang to Sumner, which is like a 26-hour drive. Not that far, but the roads in Laos are just absolutely horrible. And I wanted to film what I saw of Niu Xin Dao when I was a little kid, and it was on VHS, and we would go to pre-internet time, go to the Hmong tournaments and buy VHS of Niu Xin Dao. So I wanted to film like a really like high quality version of that and spend some time learning more about what was behind this like hyper masculine and hyper violent and, to be quite frank, like really like brutal and kind of abusive like sport. So yeah.
And hey, how's it going? My name is Gregory Yang, and I created Modern Shaman with King Vang directing it. Modern Shaman was essentially a little bit of a love letter to Minnesota, especially the Twin Cities area. One, a love letter to my culture, and a love letter to the amazing theater scene we have here in the Twin Cities. My intention with this was to essentially kind of just, I was talking to Joe about this too, like films kind of change as it progresses. It started off as like a dark comedy, and then we kind of realized that there was a lot of heart behind it instead. So we wanted to make it a feel-good comedy instead. I do want to point out this is just the first act of Modern Shaman, the first like 10, 12 minutes of it. If you want to watch the rest, it's all on YouTube already, so you can watch the full pilot, the full 30-minute pilot on that. And I guess like another thing I wanted to address was I am one of those Hmong people who love being Hmong so much I just can't speak it. It was always just a case of like, you know, family members teasing me like, Greg, you don't speak Hmong. What happens if you become a shaman? That's the answer.
Well, I just also want to point out that at least 3 of our projects are actually part of series, and I don't know if that's true for your piece as well, Ning. Yeah, so I guess these are pieces that are part of bigger series. So before I talk a bit more about mine, I want to give a shout out to, I know that at least 3 folks who are part of the film are in the crowd. So we have Jansen, who's here. Can you wave so people know who you are? Or where you are? Yeah. So Jansen, who's in the film, just amazing person who's doing so many great things for our Hmong farmers. There is also Ka, who is in the film, the elder woman farmer, and also my mom. So niya ko po. Hi to siya. And then the other elder, I don't think he was able to make it, but he has a Hmong name, but he told me he prefers to go by Tim, and so he was the other Hmong elder, the other elder in the film. And then we also have our director of photography, Serena, who shot all the beautiful footage. So I just wanted to give a shout out. So like I mentioned, this is a short piece that stands on its own, but it is also part of a larger series that's a national docu-series that's funded by the Center for Asian American Media and also in partnership with the Southeast Asian American Resource Center. And the series essentially celebrates 50 years of Southeast Asians in general being in the U.S. And so they had, for me personally, my mom is a farmer and she would farm on the side while she was working full time. And when she retired, she went full into it and just started farming and like selling. And me and my siblings, as you all heard Tim share, his kids are always like, why are you still doing this? You should stop. And that was very true for me and my siblings. We would tell my mom, like, why are you doing this, Mom? This is so hard on your body. We all work. We don't have time to help you. And so I had always thought about this. And then on top of that, seeing what my mom does, she sells at the Brooklyn Center in the farmers market in front of Sun Foods in Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park. And I always thought how, like, I saw and thought a lot about how beautiful it was that, like, a lot of Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park are actually the most diverse cities in the state of Minnesota. And that's because a lot of immigrants move there. And there's a huge African immigrant community specifically. And so it's really the Hmong community who's been able to like understand what are the foods they want and are growing it. And then that's just very much true for a lot of other immigrant communities who can't access the foods that they grew up with. And that was always something I was really interested in. And so when Wing Nguyen Lee, who is a documentary filmmaker based in LA and moving here hopefully this year, reached out. They're the series producer, reached out to me. I'd met them several years ago with this idea about potentially doing a piece about Hmong farmers as part of the series. I was like, yes, absolutely, please. And we just got into a long conversation, and I was not thinking about my mom for this, but because I've already been filming her a lot for the feature I've been working on. But because I talked about my mom's experiences, they were like, oh no, your mom needs to be in this. I was like, okay, fine. But yeah.
So my name is Peter. I'm co-creator, co-writer of Hmong Organization with my wife, who is right in the audience right there, Mei Liang. She decided to sit out there and let me sit up here so I could have the shine tonight, I guess. Thank you. Hmong Organization officially came about like maybe 15 years ago. We started writing it, but really it came from her and my experience growing up in nonprofits. Our parents worked in the nonprofits. We grew up in programming. We even worked in our own nonprofits at times, different times. So, we have so many stories from that. And then from there, we just wanted to write something that was not only funny, but, comedy allows you to tackle issues. And specifically in this issue, we dealt with a little bit with sexism and the patriarchy. But, it just allows you to talk about social issues and everything in a way that you wouldn't normally easily be able to. And so, we wrote some things. We got a bunch of people together. If you notice, a lot of the people that help out with some of the other projects here, we're all kind of incestuous, is what we say. But more like we're a family, which is great. So that's how Hmong Organization came to be. Yes.
I'm wondering if each of you could talk a little bit about that notion of the larger Hmong family of filmmaking. And I think that's something that's been really great to learn about more. I mean, I've heard about that in the city, but I've gotten to know it a bit more through this project and hearing about all of you as filmmakers and seeing different names show up. I don't know, can you talk a little bit about working in a broader sort of Hmong community of filmmakers and artists and how that impacted the work that you do? This is a general question, but doesn't have to go in order.
I think there's like this this notion that that many of us, I think, you get better at the craft the more you do it. Just, the more reps, the more hours, whether it's, acting classes or taking a film class. I think it's super. I think it's super amazing just to see kind of like the progress that was made so far compared to, like I have, friends I went to college that we studied film or we studied, storytelling, and it's just kind of nice to see the progression of Hmong films, like, tackling different topics, tackling, no pun intended, like tackling more modern day stories and issues, and in the same time developing stories that can bridge gaps between generations as well. I think in a sense there's a little bit of a responsibility and a duty for us to, as we progress in our careers, is essentially to open up more doors and break down gates and let like for instance today with these awesome youth filmmakers, it's a little bit of our I guess as we progress as an artist, I would say it's our duty to kind of also just open the web a little more, and then soon we'll just have a whole anthology of all these great pieces and stories that that history and unfortunately hasn't allowed us to really share until and we can finally tell it in this medium now. So,
Sorry, could I get the short version of that question again, really quick?
Just talk a little bit about working in the incestuous family that you were referring to earlier.
I will say that I think one of the things I'm most proud of is that when we shot Hmong Organization, this was how many years ago? Like 4, or was the pandemic? So it must have been 2021. A lot of us didn't really know each other, but we all kind of did our own little things, and we had people who were specialized in behind the camera or in lighting, and some actors and some directors and everything, but we were all still very new. And then after we created this project, it was really like a close-knit family. And even now, people are creating their own little projects that everybody kind of helps out with everyone else. And I think it's the greatest thing we can do is really just building a community and a family. It's amazing, really.
I think for me, I'm going to talk about a bit of the dark stuff before I talk about the good stuff. So I've been trying to become a filmmaker for a bit over a decade. And to be quite frank, when I was starting out, it was actually very tough as Hmong women to try to become a filmmaker, because plenty of us know that there have been really talented Hmong filmmakers for a very long time. That said, a lot of them are men, and there is a boys club, and I definitely have very strong memories of going to like filmmaker events and like being either the only woman or one of 2 women, and then just being ignored and not taken seriously. So it actually there was a community, but only for Hmong men at that time. And so it actually has been really great to see like the ways that the community has really developed and changed, and there are sectors that still definitely operate that way, and there are like big groups that are so supportive and so great at uplifting each other. And I also want to mention that one of the my biggest supports actually came from May, and I don't remember who all. I know Mux was a part of that team, but there was a brand new artists fellowship to support Asian American artists. And I was a filmmaker who had applied and got to be a part of it. And even though they were not filmmakers at the time, they were just so supportive and being like, yeah, we want to support you, teach you how to write grants, teach you how to like do all the things around your art. And over time, the film community has grown in a way that has become so like beautiful and rich, and so many people are trying to do this work and wanting to support each other and pitch in, and it's just been really beautiful to see. So
for myself, I think the coolest experiences that I've had, documentary is a very interesting genre of film, and film itself obviously has so many genres, but the biggest privilege I have as a documentarian is being able to go through, I think in like America where Hmong folks are a minority, we are looped into like one group where like Hmong people do this. But as I've been able to travel around Hmong community, I realized that like, oh wow, like the Hmong community in the US abroad is like so diverse. And even going to places like my film here in Samne, I realized, most Hmong people in the US are from Sengkuang province. And because of that, we share a lot of like very similar traits and culture. But in Samne province, even just a few hours away, some of the culture is so different. And even as a Hmong person, Hmong is my native language. I speak mostly Hmong. Like I love my Hmong people, culture, language, religion, music, everything. Even going to Samne, I was like, wow, like I learned a few things. So I think as a documentary filmmaker, it really begs the question of, why do artists do art? Like we do art to learn about ourselves, where we fit in the community. And as a documentarian, it's like, okay, where do I fit in my community? Like, what can I learn about myself while doing this project that I like really love? And so outside of the film community, I think that it allows me to get involved with everyone in the Hmong community. And that is the biggest privilege and like the thing that I am most lucky and I am most thankful about.
Great. One more question from me, but then we're going to open it up to close with some audience questions. So think about something, and then after we're done with this little exchange, shoot your hand up and a microphone will come to you. I'm wondering if you could each maybe comment a little bit about like what, for you, like what's a like uniquely Hmong quality that you bring to your practice of filmmaking? Like whether that's something we're seeing on screen or something that's part of like the production or the pre-production. I know for Gregory that's not the Hmong language, but maybe it's maybe you locate it somewhere else.
Totally.
So one of the things that we wanted to do with Hmong organization is that, a lot of us are like Gregory too. We're like, I was born here in America. Hmong is my first language, but English is my best language. And, there's nothing to be ashamed about. So, one thing we wanted to do was we just wanted to show Hmong people in film doing everyday things that they just happen to be Hmong, and their experiences are very specifically Hmong. This organization is, the things that go on there are very Hmong, but it doesn't mean that everyone's going to be speaking Hmong because we don't do that in our everyday lives. So we wanted to show, something that's represent ourselves is really what we wanted to do, So I think that's definitely something uniquely Hmong.
Yeah, I think also something that's uniquely Hmong is our pride in Hmongness, right? Because, of course, we're people who have been forced out of our homelands repeatedly over thousands of years. And there's just this ancestral practice of like pride in being Hmong and trying to keep our culture, but also like redefining what Hmongness is and trying really hard to not let that go, even if we are adapting to whatever culture we're in at that point. And so I think for me, how that shows up in a lot of my work, because a lot of the work I do is more national, it's for a national audience, and a lot of my funders and collaborators end up being national. And there was something that someone said to me last year that like was a compliment, but it actually like sent me into a bit of a crisis, because they essentially were like complimenting me about like, wow, Jewel, like we love how you do things because you're so collaborative and you're so like community first. And I was like puzzled by that, because I think that's something that the community here, like Hmong folks and also just Minnesotan artists in general, like that's just how we move in the world, most of us anyway. And on a national scale to like realize how like absurdly unique that is was like made me think like, oh my gosh, like what did I get myself into? Do I want to operate in this world that's like so cutthroat that something as simple as being collaborative and kind to each other and thoughtful is like weird and like unique, that like I'm getting like all this praise, which is weird. But then it also gave me the question of like, do I have to change myself to like survive in this field? And what I ended up deciding was I don't want to, right? Like the reason I got into this work was to be able to tell our stories and stories of other people in our own voices and not have it be dictated by what the mainstream media determines will be relatable, which often means what's relatable to a general US audience is actually what's relatable to a white cis het audience, which is heartbreaking because then you're being told, oh, your stories actually don't matter to anyone. And I decided, I think it was very much a very Hmong quality to be like, hell no, this is who I am. This is what I'm bringing to the table. I'm not willing to change my values and my Hmongness. And if that gets me less gigs, I'm cool with it. I'm okay with it.
Kind of to piggyback off what Peter said, it was I don't think you really like if you are a Hmong person, and like I think if you like you are enough, if that makes sense. You don't need to essentially force a brand on yourself to tell your story. If you are a Hmong person and you are telling a story, then you are a Hmong storyteller. I think there's some beauty in that simplicity of that. Sometimes when it comes forced, or sometimes when you try to push that where it comes performative, that's when the authenticity kind of lacks, I feel. With Modern Shaman, my goal was to tell a story about just on themes about like it's okay for us to chase greatness. There's no there's a lot of like cultural societal pressures that we as Hmong people have and practices that we do try to upkeep, but it's totally okay for us to go chase greatness. And I think that's something I would love the audience, something I would hope the audience would take away from the show. Sorry, and I'm gonna just kind of go on a little bit more. I think I have a very unique perspective in the idea that I did not really grow up in a predominantly Hmong community. Like, yes, I was here from Minnesota, born here, but I was raised in Florida. I live in Los Angeles now, and I've spent the majority of my life kind of away from Hmong communities, but I still like love being Hmong. I still love that, and I think when I meet other Hmong people who spent their lives outside of Hmong communities too, you see that the community is still there, and so currently right now for the storytelling that I want to do now, it kind of that is I'm very interested in telling perspectives of those communities that normally don't get that light right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that what makes all great answers, by the way. What makes my films and documentaries and work very uniquely Hmong, I suppose, is that I have this ability, I guess, that it's just like I'm very lucky that I can go and talk to people and get really in. So instead of talking about my film, I'll talk about the Hmong antique business that I just started like a few years ago. I tried to find these like antique Hmong flintlocks, so these firearms. And Hmong people, we're from what we call China today, which is where gunpowder was first invented. So Hmong people were one of the first people to invent and use firearms, and we were actually one of the few and only people in Asia to adopt flintlock technology. So even like the Han Chinese did not adopt that, but Hmong people did, and we made like these very uniquely Hmong flintlocks. And I went on this like journey to try to find and reclaim these pieces, and a lot of them were bought by U.S. soldiers when they went overseas during the Secret War, the Vietnam War, and then they would like trade their like modern American guns for these flintlocks, which were like 100, 200 years old. And going back to Laos and Vietnam and Thailand, Myanmar and southern China, trying to find these, all these countries, any sort of firearm is illegal. Like, you just straight up cannot have them. And I would go to these Hmong villages and I would ask them, like, "Nei pu mo paw na," do you guys have any guns? And if you know the Hmong community and you know Hmong people, you know that, because of this history, because of how we live, it's very, I would go to these towns that were like 100 families or something. They would have like several thousand people, and I would be like, "Nee, but mo paw na, you guys have guns," and they would be like, "Oh, pelu zona na pitch mo ita paw," we don't have one gun in this entire village, of like thousands of people, and it was just like completely like, obviously they were lying because it's illegal there. But I had this like ability where I would be able to talk to people and like find out where like these guns were, and I would find like these antiques where people like they hid them in the forest and they were like rotting away, and I would reclaim them and currently still restoring and like restoring them and returning to them to the Hmong community, because a lot of times in the community we view, in marginalized communities, we view like maybe our history or our language itself or our culture or religion is not important, and we just want to like discard it or sell it off. And then we find out this happens a lot with Hmong silver, Hmong jewelry, Hmong firearms. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents sold them to the Vietnamese or the Lao or the Thai, and now us as children, we want to reclaim that. Now we have to go and purchase it back. And so I have this, what makes my work like uniquely Hmong is I think like I want to avoid that, and I want to like do it right now before we have, before my children and grandchildren have to go and like reclaim that. And bullfighting is just like, it's a tradition, not necessarily culture, but it's a tradition. A lot of my other work is very much the culture, the music, the language, the stuff that is very in depth about what it means to be Hmong.
Well, we've got a few minutes. If there's any questions from the audience, shoot your hand up. A microphone will come over to you. We can take whoever gets the mic first. I think it's going to be over here.
Sorry.
You're good. Go.
Hi. Okay, so I'm Shang, and thank you all so much for your films, by the way. I cried a lot, so I don't know how my makeup looks right now, but it was very, and I cried laughing also, so it was very good. When I think of film, I think of it being a medium of art that is storytelling. It's got cinematography, it's got music, it's got a written script and actors and actresses and all the things. And I kind of have just two questions for all of you. Were there any Hmong films that you grew up watching that really inspired you, or that maybe you just really resonated with, whether that be emotionally or just like creatively? And then also, where do you see Hmong American films being in the next 50 years?
I think I grew up with like people would have camcorders and they would go back like, "Oh, these are the mountains. These are the mountains in Yosemite," and it was like very like poor quality, quote unquote, but it's very like authentic, and like that's what documentaries are. And I don't think there's like there's no like true documentary, because everything has somewhat of a script to it, and you're editing some parts out, so there's no like true documentaries. But that's definitely like what inspired me and made me realize that not everything has to be perfect, and it can be like crappy like quality. It could be 360p, but if you have a good story to it, it really reminds me that like story is king.
I'm gonna actually take an opposite route. It's just that I didn't watch a lot of Hmong movies, and I have nothing against them. If you're a fan of them, that's great for you, but they're not my thing. And so actually, that's part of the reason why we created what we did, was because we're like, a lot of the Hmong movies are more traditional, or maybe they, a lot of them were shot in Laos or whatever. And so we actually wanted to do something that we're like, we're Hmong Americans too, and we're Hmong too. We're Hmong Americans, but we're also Hmong, and we wanted to show something that represents us, and something that looks like us, and something we can resonate with. So it wasn't necessarily because of something that I watched, but it was really because wasn't a big fan of that stuff. I wanted to see something else. So
Yeah, I think that the Hmong community, whether or not other people know it, we've been creating like amazing media for years, right? But it's primarily for us. And I think that's been both such a beautiful thing because we have our own media to consume, but it's also been limiting in that like no one else knows our stories. And so oftentimes that's my struggle, and that like I'm trying to create work for a national audience, and it's sometimes tough to find collaborators who are trying to do the same thing. But in recent years, there's so many people who also have that dream of like, we want our stories to be told by us for a wider audience, to have people see the authentic us and not these like portrayals from people who know very little about us and who are researching us through these sources that aren't written by us and aren't entirely authentic or accurate, right? And more and more of us are doing that, which is so beautiful. And I just actually had a conversation with a young emerging filmmaker today who recently moved out to LA last year. And this guy got an email from me, and Melissa and Yang got an email because I'm like, oh no, because he was just like, I don't know any Hmong folks who are trying to do similar things, trying to break into the mainstream. I'm like, oh, we're around.
We're gonna find them. We're gonna find
like,
them.
trust me. I'm like, I will connect you to several today. And so I think it's going to continue to be such a beautiful thing to see our stories continue to get out there to a wider audience and being told more authentically, because I think many of us have seen work that's been distributed nationally, internationally about our communities that a lot of us flinch at and make us very uncomfortable, because it's always weird to see how another community that's rather ignorant to who we are tell a story about us and do it in a way that feels like, even if it's not blatantly harmful, it feels harmful. So, yeah.
I watched a lot of music videos with my family. So a lot of Paradise music videos. Yeah, it was I just remember there's like just Sunday mornings, we just eat breakfast and watch music videos while my sister danced along to it. It was good times. As for the future of Hmong filmmakers, once more to piggyback off Joa, I think it's, I would hope that as we grow forward, we have more Hmong people that move into leadership positions, just beyond directors, beyond, beyond the first person on the top of the call list. I think it's just as we are having the opportunity to produce our work, and I just would hope that we when we do get those opportunities, we take full advantage of it and go for home runs every time. But it's okay if you don't get the home run too. So yeah.
Great. Another question from the audience? Just talk into it. It'll come on.
Hello. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hello. Okay. Hello. Hi. My name is Megan Lee, and first and foremost, good job on the projects, including the first two too. I'm gonna have a mixture of Hmong and English, so I hope that's okay, right? So like Putouna, we used to have a very big Hmong film movie market, right? As we all know now, the market's pretty dead. So I guess I just kind of want to hear, and there's no right or wrong answer, but I just want to hear your input and your thoughts about how do you think we can bridge that again with the new generations to come to bridge our Hmong film, whether if it's Hmong American base or just Hmong genuine authentic based movie and films to our younger generations.
Oh man, that's such a good question. So the question for the Hmong part for the English speakers is, when we would go to, like, in the cultural context, we would go to like these Hmong sports tournament. They would have VHS for sale, and it was like a really big market, and people would, people probably make like several $1,000s a day, and now it's like that doesn't exist anymore. I think that this is a bigger, like, it's not I don't want to use the word issue, but it's a bigger thing that's happening. It's not just Hmong, the Hmong community, like entire filmmaking community right now. There's like the problem of piracy. Like everything's digital. Like no one like buys a CD anymore. No one buys a DVD anymore. So this is a problem quote unquote, or obstacle, something that all filmmakers, all of us, and everyone has to think about. This is like a really big problem, and I think like none of us can give you a good answer, and I don't think any filmmaker would. I remember like a good answer someone asked, like when I was like really into vlogging like 5-6 years ago, someone asked like, why is vlogging even an art? And that was like a very interesting question, because I think like sometimes the art begins to define itself, and like vlogging began to evolve in a way that like no one could predict, because it was like something new. And now in this like digital age, like we can't predict how artists will make money, how artists will make a living, or how they will solve that problem. But I think that art is something that's so inherently human that it's gonna happen. I don't have a good answer for that, but that's just like a big philosophical question too.
For me, I think I don't think I slightly disagree in the idea. I don't think that Hmong filmmaking is dead. I think it's just evolved and it's changed, very much like what Ning said about how the industry is changing to more like streaming services and things like that. I don't necessarily think though that it is dead. I just think that Hmong filmmakers are just changing the way they tell the stories and how they want to tell their stories, and it may not have the same, for lack of better words, it may not have the same resonance as those films of our past have shown. But I think there is a new flair that's coming along, and for me, I think it's because maybe it's my generation right now. That's something I'm personally really excited about. Yeah.
Yeah, to sort of echo that, like, just generally the way that people across the world consume media is just different now. So all filmmakers, including Hmong folks, have had to shift. And even though the Hmong like filmmaking scene doesn't look the way it used to, I think it's definitely thriving, and it's like having sort of a renaissance and a resurgence. And I also recently met Brian Vu, who's a local Hmong filmmaker as well. And he and I were just briefly talking about this, where he's like, oh yeah, I'm part of the OG filmmakers, right? We made a lot of films back in the days, but we don't have the energy, the time, right? Because for the most part, most of us have to work day jobs. We don't make a living off of this, but we're so passionate that we do it anyway. And the older you get, once you have kids and other responsibilities, you just don't have the capacity. And so they're still there around and they're still passionate. It's just they don't have the capacity, but they're so excited for younger folks. And that's essentially what's happening. Younger folks are rising up and taking the reins. And I think one thing that I definitely notice a lot as a documentary filmmaker is that I think in general, the Hmong community sees like scripted narrative filmmaking as films, but not docs as films, which is heartbreaking to me because there's so much like craft. Like even watching like Nang's piece, I was just like, oh my gosh, the creative choices, the way that he shot this and that, and also the way he chose to have certain things show up at different times. Like it's seriously an art, it's film. And I think we're actively creating film. Hmong people make so much content that we just put out into the world, whether or not we make money. And it's still film, even if we don't necessarily see it immediately that way. And so I think it's always going to happen. My hope, though, is that we can actually be paid to do it. And that's something that I'm very passionate about, because aside from just making films, I also mentor a lot of emerging filmmakers, and I teach people how to make films. And that's something I love. And one thing I often try to tell people is like, hey, you should be demanding to be paid. And that's something that I hope that we can continue to develop so that people can at least have the capacity to do this work.
Okay, I'll be quick because I know we're short on time, but just like everyone is saying, you know, everything is just evolving. And I actually like to look at the positive, which is that what's happened is that in the past, people had to come, you know, you had to find a lot of money to film these things, and it was very exclusive to a lot of people. But because of the digital age, you know, pretty much anyone could put something together now, and I think it's great that people can just, tell your own stories and throw it on, a platform and show it to everybody in the world. So I actually think it as a good thing. But like Joa said, it'd be great if we could get paid for it too. So.
I'll also just throw in there that I think there's something about Hmong filmmakers, and I think Minnesotan filmmakers in general, where there's this very strong like imposter syndrome of like, oh, I'm not like a real filmmaker, so I can't possibly get this grant, or I can't possibly get this funding or this support. And I'm like, hey, look, I've gone to Sundance and seen some of the work they screen. Your work's better. So trust me, you should be applying. Like, I promise you. And oftentimes it's just like our own belief gap that then prevents a lot of us from doing it. So, and also I've had amazing mentors who've been like, look, Jua, you need to get rid of this like Hmong humility BS because it's not serving you. You need to like be like, I'm amazing and I deserve this. And it's something I continue to work on. I'm not great at it, but I'm better, thankfully, because I have great people looking out for me. But that's something that I try to pass on to other people. I'm like, look, I promise you, you're amazing. You should apply for all these funds that aren't just local, but like national. I promise you. And there are people and like foundations and organizations that are looking for our stories and who are like, oh my gosh, Hmong stories. Oh, we haven't seen this before. We want this.
Thank you so much. Well, I think we could go on all night, but we've been here for a little while, so I think that's a good point to maybe call it quits for the night. Thanks so much for coming out, everybody. I think everybody's going to be in the lobby for a moment, so if you have another direct burning question to ask, please find a filmmaker and strike up a conversation. Thanks for coming out. Night. Thanks, guys. That was so great.